Hello everyone out there, and today I'm going to show you a little bit about how to make some of these very unique pine trees. These are 9-inch pines. Let's get to it. Some of the stuff that I do, I think most people could probably do on their own hobby bench or in their own home or garage or what have you, but I think there's some other things you'll see in this video that are going to be more difficult to replicate at home. So I just wanted to get that out there, that I can't really guarantee that anyone will be able to come up with these results on their own, but I'm sure going to share with you everything, how I do it here at the shop. And that way you might be able to glean, certain portions might be of benefit throughout the video. So it's a little bit of a disclaimer, but also a little bit of an explanation, I hope, as to what this video is really about. So it's just about sharing the techniques that I've been working on for several weeks, some of them for several years, and trying to get that out there and do the greatest good, get the benefit to the modelers. So I'm not necessarily advocating for your purchasing Coastman's trees. That's always an option, of course. I welcome that, but really this is more about, for me, more about just sharing information that I've learned over the years. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks. So I have some fairly ridiculous photos of pine trees, but let's just go ahead and use them. They'll work fine for what we want to talk about here, because what I really want is a silhouette of a pine tree. And so this one here will do just fine. I'm going to zoom in here just a little bit. I want to talk about these limbs. So here we have a relatively straight trunk, and then most of these branches kind of shoot off to the sides more or less at a 90-degree angle. And then look at this one. It dips down and it's kind of sloping downward, and then right at the end it whips up. And so there's like these curly Q tips, I would call those. And that's more or less where the branching is taking place also. You can zoom in on that even a little closer, just to really kind of capture that. Look at that, 90 degrees to the trunk. It goes down and whips up at the ends. And these are lodgepoles and ponderosas we're talking about here. So let's take a look at a couple others. And, oh, is that the last one? I gotta get all the way out. Okay. And here, this one. Now this one has foliage, obviously. And let's just go in and see if we can see that kind of that same effect that those limbs have. And that differentiates these from say, Douglas fir trees considerably. And the bulk of the foliage, the needles, that is, right at the very ends here. Each one of these tips has these little globs of needles just sort of gobbed on right on the little ends there. Okay, so, and now we can see that these are taken off at pretty close to 90. You got to remember, we're looking up at this tree from the ground. And then they kind of go out and they have a little bit of a down swoop, and then they go up. And there is probably some difference between the branches getting up towards the top of the tree. If we get way up here and look, we're going to see up here these branches project almost initially just start going up right away. We're right at the treetop here, and they're just, these are the newest, youngest branches on the tree. As we work our way down the tree, here we've got that 90-degree presentation followed by the down swoop, and that's going to be even more pronounced as we get towards the bottom of the tree. And here we can, I don't know if you can see that, it's awful dark, but you can almost see that branch taken off at a slope, a downward slope right there. Okay, I don't know what else I have. Probably some more horrible photos, but I'll take what I can get when I'm on the run. Here's one, the double trunk. Always liking the double trunk, I do. And yeah, you can still see that. Look at those newer branches, that material just pointing right up, trying to get a taste of that delicious sunlight. You got to have it. So that's the real tree. So let's see if we can make our models look that way. Okay, so this is a 9-inch tree that is pretty much just, we're talking about step 1 here. This is done in one step with caulk. All right, and I've taken white caulk and added just a little bit of black craft paint to it, and that makes the compound in use that you see here. So all of this was attached to this straight armature with just this gray colored caulk that I came up with. We're talking $2 to $3 at the hardware store. Some 9-inch cedar trunks here, and you could use any of the cedar trunks that I have, or any other armature that you'd like to use that's relatively straight for this process. And a couple different products here. We've got 2 different brands of latex caulk. We've got the this is the Red Devil brand I found at the hardware store in town, and also the Loctite. This is the Power Grab all-purpose interior construction adhesive. And I'm not endorsing these products by any means, and certainly not sponsored, but just yesterday I thought I'd give these a try as far as how well they can retain some of this armature material here. So what we have here is an Excelsior product that I've dyed it, make it a little bit gray. It comes quite bleach blonde in color when you receive it. And that's actually kind of like a packaging material. It's an aspen wood cut on a special machine that produces that. And I'm cutting it into different lengths. So this is about the 1-inch length or so there. And then also I have a much shorter 1/2-inch length here. And just cutting it with these scissors. And so let's go ahead and get a trunk ready and get some of this mixed up and see how it goes. So I decided I'd go with the painter's caulk here and just see how that goes. Give myself a little dab there. Now what I want to do is just mix a tiny little amount of this black acrylic into it here. Not much, because I don't want it to be really dark. So just a little tiny drop. And I'll mix that in pretty good there. And that'll come out kind of a nice gray, I hope. Hopefully not too dark. Got to get just the right amount. That craft paint, the black version of the folk art, very strong in terms of its ability to tint something that's white. And now I need to put in one of these stainless steel planting pins. So I've already kind of pre-cut this one, but just to illustrate with the side cutters, I'll make an end sharp and then get a little bit. I like to use the yellow glue for this. It's a little bit stronger. And stick that down in the hole and push it in with a pair of pliers. Careful now, you never really know what's going to happen. So just a little turning and twisting gently, okay? And when that's done, then we can trim off the excess, again using the side cutters, and sharpen that point. There we go. And that one's ready to stick into something. Okay, so now I can take my trunk and I can apply a little bit of this painter's caulk with the gray tint that I've mixed into it. I can just get that on the trunk. Nice liberal application there. And what I'll do is I'll apply it, get it all over, and then I'll kind of lift it off a little bit by just tapping like that. And that gives it a little bit more grab when we go to do the subsequent step where we're going to push some of these Excelsior fibers into that material. Okay, so that's now. So I'll start with some of the short ones and use those down near the base of the trunk. And notice how I did a little pulling there. It just kind of helps straighten them out a little bit. So there's one kind of sticking out, and I'm just going to pull that out of the way. And that allows me to tap and get some of those embedded into that caulk. Just like that. And they're not perfect, but overall, they're going to build the armature that's going to help us make a pine tree that hopefully will be somewhat realistic by the time we're all done here. Now I can also do some of the longer fibers. So again, just kind of straightening those out a little bit and adding to the trunk. If they'll get in. If they don't stick, then you can maybe just add a little more of the caulk material, because these are having a little bit of difficulty. So I'm going to just do that now. Just kind of get that on there pretty thick. Not, you don't want it to fall off or anything, but like so. And then the interesting thing about this Excelsior is it's quite curly in places and has rather a pine style limb effect to it. I don't like it when they're all bunched up in one spot. I like them a little bit spread out. So I'll probably go back and work this over relatively carefully for a minute or two, just to kind of improve on the overall distribution of the branches here. Sometimes I like to hang it upside down and give it a little spin. So sometimes I like to use this more pointy sculpting knife and go back through and just kind of start straightening out some of the fibers, pushing them around a little bit. Now I don't want to get caulk on this, because that would make it much more difficult to do this job. If I do get caulk on it, I got to wipe it off right away before I go on to the next one, because if I touch a branch and I've got caulk on my knife, it's going to pull that branch right off the trunk, because it's very delicate right now before it dries. So just pushing those around. And now I can, if I'm careful and I want to add one, well, the easiest way to do it is just to dip in by hand into some caulk, and you can pretty much just capture one right on the side of the trunk doing it that way. And if you've got it on your fingertips or something, then it's going to make it much more difficult to get that off of there. So see right there. Okay. Alrighty, so we're coming up with our main armature here, and some of these are quite long. If it's so long that it's, you know, fighting to stay upright, might be able to just give those a little bit of a trim, and that will preserve the ability of the caulk to hold that. Okay. So this armature now needs a chance to dry, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in it's the tree back cave, and I'll actually allow this one to dry upside down, or it could go right side up, but upside down's better. So alrighty, and you can see we've got several here that are up and running, so we'll be showing those off in a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is just add a little bit of white glue with this. I took a chip brush and I've cut it so it just has a few fibers sticking out. And I'm just going to add white glue to the tips. I'm just kind of dabbing on here a little bit of white glue. So I don't want it on the trunk primarily. I mostly just want it on the periphery of this armature. Okay, there we go. It's pretty much ready to go now. And if there's any heavy globs, like let's just put a big old glob on there too, all right? If there's any of those, I'll show you what I'm going to do with those next. Alrighty, so I've got myself a bucket here and my armature with my glue gobs on it there, and I want to get rid of some of the gobs, so I'm going to put it in the bucket and I'm going to spin it. Now I've already put in the steel planting pin in the base, and I failed to mention that, but that's already there, and that makes it easier to handle the armature and the production of this whole thing. All right, so this is just going in here, and I'm going to spin it, give it a good hard spin. I don't know if you can hear that, but some of the glue came off of the armature and just hit the sides of the bucket. So it's essentially like a waste bucket here. So this is where I've been capturing all of my extra stuff that I want to either get off of the trunk or also to project it more laterally away from the trunk. So if I put something on there and I want to bring it out, I have the option of spinning it. And that's what the bucket's for. This is the addition of the fibers. So I've got just a lineup of different types of fibers I can now add to the trunk that has the glue on it. So this is the longer, kind of a long curly fiber here. This is made from I believe it's a twisted sisal rope, and then I've boiled it. I've twisted it further and then boiled it to retain the twisted shape. So that's a whole production kind of thing, just coming up with that. But you can basically cut that from a sisal rope. So this one was not twisted before it was cut, and so I don't know if you can see that or appreciate that, but on video there, but it's got a little bit of a twist to it. If you twist it and then boil it, it's better, and it's got a little bit more curl to it, and that's going to come out visually when we see this pine tree and we're looking for those curled branches. So I'm going to go ahead and do that one first. I'm just going to take what I have left here and just I'm just putting it onto the trunk by just kind of dabbing it on there, just getting some of those nested into that white glue. And then I can just, again, just kind of gently twirl it and kind of bring some of those out laterally. And then I can repeat that with different types of fibers depending on what I'd like to see. Okay, so this is a smaller fiber. This is a 1/4 inch fiber here that I've cut with scissors, or I've got a special machine back here, a 1/4 ton press with some razor blades in it. Careful with that. And again, just twirling to kind of move those fibers out laterally. And then also I'm hanging the tree. You'll notice I'm doing it, holding it upside down. So that's going to essentially bring them upwards at the tips. So lastly, I have, this is a Porterford cedar material. It's really quite fine, very curly. It's also quite fragile. So I tend to use it only on the periphery here, just the final last little bit. And I will give this one more application after it's dry. So this is sort of like step 2. Step 1 is just getting those basic stronger armatures laden in there using the caulk. And then step 2 is the first addition of a few fibers. And then step 3 is kind of the finishing touch. And that would be another application of this sawdust, Porterford cedar sawdust material. This is made in the sanding machine that makes the trunks, the tapering machine. And so it's longitudinally sanding the dowel. And while it's doing that, it's then producing these long curly fibers as part of the byproduct from that process. And so again, a little bit of an upside down spin here. And so it's just got a little bit of that on there right now, and I want to add more of that later. So this then needs to dry, and so that needs to go somewhere warm. And so I have a whole box or container for that with some infrared lights in it. It's very handy. Not everyone has that, obviously, so this would probably need to dry overnight. Or you could use a heat gun or a hair dryer to make that happen more quickly. All right. So I was going to opt for drying in my infrared lamp tree incubator here. I call it the tree bat cave. All right. But I think I'll try the heat gun. So this is where I do a lot of my airbrushing, and it's just kind of where I keep the heat gun. So I'll put this on, set that to maybe a medium settings. Okay, somewhere in there. Doesn't need to be real hot. And I'll just apply that upside down, always kind of wanting it to go in the upward direction, kind of like a spruce tree, but it'll be a pine tree when it's finished. You can kind of twirl it and dry it at the same time so that no one spot gets too hot. And when it's thoroughly dry, some of these larger globs of white glue, they're going to disappear more or less. And we're going to give this a paint job too. So if this is dry enough, then it's time for a little additional white glue. Again, just applying right onto the tips of the armature for the next application, and we'll give it a spin too. Alrighty, back to the bucket for that spin. There we go. So with this material, this Porterford cedar fiber, it's a little difficult to get it to drape onto the tree of its own because it's just so intertwined with itself. So I'm just going to kind of apply it like so. Just sort of pushing it on there and allowing the white glue to grab some of it. And so this is where it's helpful to have the third hand, and I've got the tree in a little foam block here. And that's why it's so nice to have that planting pin already in the base of the tree. All right, so that's pretty ugly, but I'm going to hold it upside down and give it a little bit of a spin and then just pull off some of those extra particles, portions of that curly Porterford cedar. And now maybe you can begin to sort of see how my reasoning here for these curls is they're so nice for that pine tree affect that we want so badly. And the video is pretty bad, so hopefully we're going to see this better in a nice photo. I'm going to touch this up with a paintbrush. So again, holding the tree upside down, I'm going to go through with my brush, and this is a fairly flexible brush. I'm not sure what this is called, this brush, but I'm just working through, and just this is an opportunity to kind of touch up some of these really fine fibers and move them about and get them where I want them while I'm rotating here. And some of them I'll press them into the glue a little bit more. And I'm just kind of fooling around. It doesn't have to take forever, but just a minute or two of this seems to make a really big difference in the overall presentation of this thing. And then this needs to dry. Again, I could put that in an infrared heat, or I could probably just apply a heat gun to kind of finish the deal here. So at this point, our pine tree armature, it's getting pretty close to a finished armature, but the colors are all wrong. So we need to apply both a paint as a color and an adhesive that will allow strengthening of the whole object and make it have much better longevity. So to accomplish this last step with our armature, it's necessary to apply a adhesive with some color in it. So I have mixed up white glue, matte medium, with some color, and I have it, it's kind of a specialized setup here with a mini gun connected to a pressure pot in order to deliver that to the trees. So that's the next step. That's not something that is going to be commonly found at the hardware store. So probably better to hold it upside down and spray it. So that needs to dry. Now's a good time just to give it a little bit of a spin there, just to kind of get those branches not too hard. We don't want stuff flying off of it too much, but we just want to get it so that it's going to have as much lateral projection as possible at this point. And that needs to dry. So this is where the tree bat cave is really handy, and we can take our drawing armature and find a place to pin it upside down. And in here in a few minutes that'll be taken care of. Alrighty, got some. Okay, it's looking pretty good overall. So we've got lots of curly fibers on there. And at this point, we could either add more fibers to it and let it dry, go for another round, or we could just go ahead and apply some green foliage to it, or whatever you would desire. It could be a fall color, etc. So this is kind of the takeoff point here for finishing it up. So let's go ahead and see what it looks like when we start adding some color. So back to the dabbing technique here for a second. And this is, I don't want the green foliage right up against the trunk. I want those pine needles out distant and away from the trunk. So hence I'm going to keep it right on the tips here. And if anything gets globby, I'll give it a good little spin. This glue is pretty thick right now. It's been sitting out overnight. So that can be kind of helpful actually. So if your glue's too thin, all you got to do is wait a little while. Okay. And so there we are there. Alrighty, and a little centrifuge action here. And that'll do it. Oop, maybe a little more. The tree's getting much stronger now. Alrighty, so this is it. It's just a bucket with some green sifted dry sawdust in there. And you could use any brand of foliage turf that you prefer. I kind of make my own. So I've got a little yogurt container here, and I'm just going to sprinkle that on to wherever I put the glue. I think my glue dried, so I might have to do this one more time. Give a little spin there. Yeah, let's go once more on that because as you can see on my little white dots, I've got to hit it up with some fresh glue. Alrighty, one more time. And give that a little bit of a spin there. I could go for the underside too. Okay, so I didn't get a ton on there, but I've got one more trick in my back pocket with this foliage, and that's another Porterford cedar material that is dyed green, kind of similar to the gray stuff that I put on there, but it's a little finer, and it's going to add the effect of the final effect of the pine needles here. One more bucket spin. This stuff is so dusty, I actually kind of keep it out in the shop because I don't even want it in where I make the trees. It's very dusty, and as you can see it probably falling through the grate here. I use this kind of grate, a couple of grids up here, to help it fall, and I just rub it on here, and it's going to go all over the armature here. So that's the technique right there to get the last fiber. This is a finer Porterford cedar sawdust material. It's very dusty. I'm normally wearing a face mask when I'm doing this, but I need to talk right now. So once I've applied it, then I'm going to give it a little bit of a twirl here, and that just needs to dry, and we'll see what we have. Alrighty, so this came out okay. I kind of wish it was a little bit fuller, so I think it needs some more detail added to the ends of these limbs prior to the application of the green foliage material. It's all right, but it just looks a little bit not so full to me. Okay, so I really want to improve on that, and I'll go back and I'll probably add some more material to this and give it a couple more run throughs before adding the green foliage material, and that'll maybe beef up the presentation of this one. Let's take a look at some others though and see how they came out, and that'll be the end of it. Alrighty, so some of these I think are coming out pretty nice. So here's Van and the Moose. She's HO scale. We've got ourselves a 9-inch pine tree, and just taking a look, this one has some really nice projection. I started out with some pretty hefty limbs in there, and just worked my way out with the addition of different fibers, generally starting with longer fibers and then proceeding towards shorter fibers in the process. I sculpted this trunk ahead of time with a unique base, and I'm pretty happy with this one. Let's check out another one. Alrighty, Vanna back again here. This is another tree I'm happy with. I like the foliage on this one. It came out a little fuller. I really appreciate that. I think it's got more of the pine tree kind of look to it. Again, I did a sculpted root base on this one. One thing we're lacking here that it needs is a better pine tree bark. This is kind of the Douglas fir kind of style thing going on here. And I did add a little bit of a Sierra-ish color, sienna, sorry, to that to try to rust it up a little bit and grab a hold of some of the lodgepole or ponderosa kind of look to that. So, all right, liking these curly limbs, that's working for me. And it's again 9 inches. Okay, and another one. This is another 9-inch tree, and this one I was able to plant in a wire into the wooden trunk base and glue it in there and then sculpt it a little bit. So I got kind of this unique curved projection coming out from the trunk, like a secondary kind of tree look, and did a more or less a dead top on this one, and a very rooty base, very lots of roots going on there. So I'm not sure exactly what species of tree this is, but I'm liking the look of it. And so that's another thing that's possible with the additive fiber kind of system here. All right, tree number 4 here. This is a very pretty much basic kind of a little tree. It's got a bamboo skewer. So this really does illustrate what the fibers are capable of doing. I did use a little tree pitch, top secret tree pitch on this one to get some of these branches started, but that can be done with a caulk now. So that's not really a problem anymore. And so this, without having a fancy trunk, this one kind of really does show off some of the foliage potential of the adding successive layers of fiber by gluing them just right by the tips over and over again. It helps to have a lot of different kinds of fibers. I couldn't tell you exactly which fibers I used to make this one, but I guarantee you there's some sisal in there, and it's very curly. And they're probably 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch long pieces. Alrighty, so here's another look at that tree we just made in the video. So again, it's okay, but it could really use some more fluff. It's not real full on the branch factor on the, with lots of pine needles and stuff like that. So it just needs a little help in that department. It's going to be a very nice tree. It just needs a little additional work. So this is armature here that produced with no foliage added to it yet. So it's essentially kind of like a snag tree with lots of curly fibers on there. And I think this is a very applicable pine snag tree. Perhaps this was diseased or something like that. And so you don't necessarily have to add green foliage to all the trees in order to have something unique. So, okay, the final show-off tree here is this 9-inch tree. This one has more breadth than any tree I've attempted yet. And that's because I did kind of a special job on these branches leading up to the foliage on the ends of the branches, which, so it's the same system as I've been showing you. It's just that I essentially made a snag tree using the tree pitch and some other acrylics, or I should say other acrylics, in order to get started, and then adding the foliage onto the branches. So it's kind of a special one. And that pretty much concludes the whole series here on how to make these pine trees with the so-called additive fiber method, I've termed it. And I sure thank you for watching. Hit the thumbs up button if you liked the video. And I wish you all an awesome, awesome day and happy model railroading. Bye for now.